Hey, hello everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning from wherever you are joining. Welcome to this part 6 of Ask Me Anything AMA of Clarity Chat. This is the 53rd episode of Clarity Chat, and we are this long way since the start. For thanks to your encouragement and engagement from all over the world. So last time, when we had our 52nd episode, you asked many questions, and we also got into discussion about taboo topics in IT. But of course, we couldn't pick them all up. So we will again discuss in today's Clarity Chat AMA session some of those taboo topics. So, this is my chance to connect directly with all of you and discuss things with a lot of candor and honesty over a cup of tea. So, welcome to this Clarity Chat session. I think it's also been a long time since I did a AMA session with you. So, it's always good to, discuss and very importantly, we also take this opportunity to come live with me on the chat. Any one of you has that opportunity. So if you have a topic to discuss, to share, please put in your comment there, and I'll ask my team to share with you the link to join this chat live. And yes, a comment can bring us together for a discussion here. We will also be covering some backlog of past questions. I think there was an interesting one, which is the CISO versus outsourced Infosec services, which we debated quite a lot when I was building the Infosec function, because the answer is neither this way or not that way. Plus, there are some other questions as well. Like, for example, somebody asked whether CIO's position should become mandatory. And of course, your live questions coming here. And yeah, as always, you will get honest answers, case studies, or some practical approaches or thought processes. But one thing you won't get is no gyan. It's all experiences and approaches. So before going ahead, let me request my audience to share their name and where you are joining from in the comment box on YouTube or LinkedIn. And let's see who all have joined us already. So we have Amit Pandey here. Hi, Amit. Thanks for joining us. And we also have Amrinder here. Hey, Amrinder. Thanks, as always, for joining us. And this time, I'm going to make sure that we don't miss your question. Last time, we missed one. Okay. So please keep your questions coming, or anything that you think is important in terms of an IT discussion or discourse which you don't see happening otherwise, and let's discuss it here. So let us now start with some unanswered questions. While I wait for your questions, let me start with some unanswered questions. So we have Dattatray who asked a question around what do CIOs prefer with respect to managing the information security? In-house CISO or a contract with SLA service provider? So Dattatray, it's good to see you here. Let me answer that question, and I'm sure it prompts you to ask more questions. So it's not a straight answer, and it's not like either or. Either you can build the entire information security team in-house, or you can take everything from outside. So let's go into all my discussions and my approaches. Let's get into the first principles. So what's the first principle in terms of managing information security? I think one is you want to keep the accountability inside. You want to own it. There'll be your audit committee who will be asking you questions, who will be wanting to understand what you're doing, why you're doing, how you're doing. You need to connect with businesses. A lot of information security initiatives require engagement with business functions, as well as governance with business functions. Like, for example, the first time we started the discussion about, disabling USB drives in desktops and laptops, the factories were all for it. Uh, but the sales and marketing were all against it. And as through a process of governance, we had to bring them onto one discussion table and then have a more sophisticated discussion, which goes beyond, we must do it or we must not do it, right? It's more a nuanced discussion as to, who can do it, who cannot do it, when it is done, with what kind of controls. And you know what? You cannot have a vendor drive that discussion or discourse internally. It is only you who can drive it, and therefore you require someone internally to be knowledgeable enough to drive that sophisticated or nuanced discussion. But at the same time, a lot of these services, uh, this information security is one area which is also changing the fastest. Okay, so there are new threats emerging almost every day. And the real, I would say, um, solution to many of the threats that you're going to face will be available in the ecosystem, will be available, with what others have faced. And I think one of the biggest values that a partner brings to the table is in terms of the experiences, with various other customers like yours. So you benefit from what they are doing with others, right? So you cannot afford to lose out on that collective wisdom or experience. So so now you need to be you need to decide what are those things where I need accountability internally, where I need to drive a new set of behaviors internally, or where I need to engage in, let's say, uh, conflicting or contentious topics internally, versus where I need those technical skills, or those, keeping up to date absolutely with the latest in technology or threats. Keep the first one internal and keep the second one external. So um, and this is a discussion that you need to have with your HR, um, and make sure that you have a function which owns it, but you also have a partner who always keeps you up to date and who always brings the best in the business to you. So Dattatray, you are here, so if that answered your question, let me know. If there is something, if there is a follow-up question to that, please feel free to ask. So now coming to, there is questions already coming in here. So we have one question from Niral Mundu. I hope I pronounced it right, Niral. So I'm an Indian Navy veteran with IT background, but couldn't continue my core technical skills in Indian Navy. I want to enter IT projects. Please suggest me. Okay, so Niral, we are in a situation where today there's a huge dearth of technology talent. There are horror stories of, like, what's happening out there, in terms of the competition for talent, and how there's a bidding war happening out there. So please know that there is a lot of demand for technical talent. And then I think you need to navigate your way through, like, for example, connecting with either the communities or the headhunters. I'm sure if you have a relevant IT skill that is required in the marketplace, you start appearing on the on the necessary, let's say, either the job portals or the skill portals like LinkedIn, and you start contributing, and you will find that there are people interested in you, right? So I would suggest it's not a straight answer. It is first to talk to a few people and see whether the skills that you have are they really relevant. Because one of the things that has also happened is the skills needed or the technologies and the skills, they're moving at a very, very fast pace, and you can see that things getting obsolete very, very fast. I mean, like, for example, IT infrastructure. I see the number of resumes floating on our WhatsApp groups of CIOs quite a lot. And I also see that there were those people who kind of saw the disruption coming, and they have taken the cloud certifications, and they have moved towards, let's say, developing some skills in DevOps, etc., and they have kept themselves relevant. So not sufficient to have core technical skills, but whether these skills are needed in the marketplace today. If not, the skill building industry is pretty huge today, with all the those XYZ Academy or an academy kind of tools available to you out there. uh, Go and engage and figure out what's required, and I'm sure you will be able um, to find the right roles. Okay, so there was another question from Vinit Mathur. I'm not sure if Vinit is there. Let me see. Was around how to create an environment to reduce attrition and address employees' issues. Okay. I think it's a burning topic today. Everyone is dealing with attrition issues and retention questions. And my own take on this, I have managed, the IT department where I had one of the lowest attritions in the company. Um, and there's some insights or some things different that I used to do that I can share with you. Okay. And I think the first, second, and third points there are all about culture, 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 right? So, how do you build a culture where people feel safe? Uh, they can be open, they can be fearless, and they can contribute, right? And where they have learning opportunities, learning and growth opportunities. So, a lot of these things point to the leader itself. Okay. So one thing which I always held a firm belief is that I cannot complain about culture. I cannot complain about my company culture, or or blame culture on somebody else, because the culture is a clear function of my own behaviors and my own attitudes as a leader. And it's very simple that you can see within your organizations, different departments will have different cultures, and you can actually uh, think and relate them to the leader itself. If the leader uh, doesn't really care for customers, I mean, you escalate to the leader and you don't get a response, or you raise an issue and you get a blame back, you'll find that the entire department behaves like that. The entire department will not be customer centric. So at whatever level in the organization you are, right, before you start asking questions about attrition and retention, look at what kind of culture you have, and to do that, look at what kind of behaviors that you are setting an example of. Okay. For example, if you are the first one to respond to a user pain point, or a customer issue, you will find that people will not give you a chance to be the first to respond. They will be responding before you, right? If you do not entertain politics, sometimes my favorite I would say hack there used to be that if somebody comes complaining against somebody else, I'll basically get both of them in the room, and I'll drive an honest I would say, non-intrusive conversation. I mean, starting that, hey, there's a misunderstanding. I mean, so you put your point of view, you put your point of view, I'll put my point of view, and let's see where we can reconcile it, right? So it's a very, very, I would say, safe and unintrusive environment. Not really trying to benefit from a difference of opinion between the two people. And then you find that, I mean, people realize that, hey, what doesn't work here is like, backbiting or complaining. And what people basically start looking towards is like, solving the problems and driving the same attitude with respect to their people. So, there are other things like, for example, the rewards and recognition. Do you recognize your people enough? There is like, your teams are doing all kinds of good work all the time, right? The moment you get to know something, are you the one who goes and pats their back there? Are you the one who has the back of the people? That means if somebody messes up, are you the one who's the first one to shout at the top of the voice? Or, the one who hangs this guy out there in the open saying that, hey, you know what, we don't do like this. This guy messed up. Okay, so um, uh, don't worry, I'll take care of him. So, or is it that, I say, hey, you know what, I mean, this guy just made a mistake. Maybe, we didn't have enough safeguards, so I'll take care of the issue. Okay, and we'll make sure that this doesn't happen again. So, there are small little things which give message to people whether they are safe here or not. Are they going to be recognized? Are they going to be saved when they made a mistake? Or are they going to be hanged when they make a mistake? Is the environment being fair? What kind of behaviors are encouraged? And you will find that, eventually, when everyone makes a decision, it can either be a decision which is just more money against less money, or you can, as a leader, shape your culture to make this a decision between a great place to work versus more money. Now, let me throw that question back at you. That when it comes to a decision for you, a career decision for you, would you trade off a great place to work for a load of money? Sometimes yes, but most of the times you will definitely think twice. You will at least try to ensure that this other place with boatload of money, okay, is at least equivalent in terms of work culture and a great place to work like what I have. If not, I don't think money can buy you talent. Okay. Uh, I must also say that, on the other side, which is attracting talent, the same thing is true. Um, it's a very open and networked world today. And whenever somebody is considering working for you or working with you, they are at least going to check with a few people, hey, what is it like to work here? And if they find that the environment is toxic, if they find that, the blokes around are insecure, there's a lot of backbiting, etc., etc., etc. The leaders don't care about people. Whatever money you throw at people, I don't think they're going to join you. Okay. So I hope that helps in terms of attrition versus retention. There's something I wouldn't want to talk at this point, but let me give you a sort of hint. I'm like now an entrepreneur building, small organizations, and I can tell you that people are leaving money on the table to continue to be uh, with us. I wouldn't say me because it's an organization. They're continuing to be with us because we have a great place to work, and we have the backs of our people, and we create a great environment, great culture. We have a lot of fun, and I don't think anybody wants to leave us just for money. They at least come to us and say, "Boss, you know what? I mean, somebody's offering me more money, so can you do something?" And yeah, but we never get a surprise that somebody is like trying to leave us, and that comes as a surprise. No. Okay, so let me now go back. It's your session. Ask me anything. So let me bring in some audience here. So we have Amrinder, Namma Bengaluru. Hey Amrinder, thanks for joining us. We have Prashant Kumar, amazing connected session to learn from seasoned leaders. Hey, thanks Prashant for that. Dattatray is here, so he was the one whose previously unanswered question I picked up. He picked up question from Niral. Good evening. I think that's Mr. Sethi, if I'm correct, LinkedIn user. Then we have Sunil Punjabi here from Mumbai. We have Arpita Narang. Hi Arpita, good evening. We have Rakesh Singh. Hey Rakesh, good evening. Rakesh himself is building a startup. It takes a lot of courage, Rakesh, I know, so keep it up. Sunil, Amrinder, we have Dr. Sheetal Bacha, leadership coach. Hey, good evening, Dr. Sheetal. We have Ajay Pawar. Hey, hi Ajay. Thanks for joining. Okay, so we have another question as I'm browsing through the comments. So we have Faiz here. A quick question: isn't it a cat and mouse game in today's cybersecurity landscape, where the role keeps changing? Yes, of course. I don't think it's a cat and mouse. It's a mouse and mouse. You're always in the catch-up game. Um, so um, so there's a world of hackers and these um, the under the radar players, or you can call it as the uh, cyber underworld, which is out there to catch your goatee. And whatever you do, sometimes it may be the vulnerabilities in the products that you're using. Sometimes it may be vulnerabilities in the code that you have. And a lot of times, your risks are coming from your technical debt, things that were done in an era where, cybersecurity wasn't that, I would say, I wouldn't say important, was that big a concern. I think today, so I know that most of the CISOs are always sitting on the edge of their seats. I mean, my empathy with all my fellows information security professionals. So cat and mouse game means you are sometimes cat going after the bad guys, but no, you're not doing that. That's why I call it as a mouse and mouse game. Fully agree with you, Faz there. Okay, now I have a question from Rajesh Borde here. He says, have customers increased their cybersecurity budgets given the typical ROI discussion is difficult? How should companies plan this budget? Of course, we saw a lot of investment coming in cybersecurity with the pandemic. So people started working from anywhere. You had to allow people to work from their homes, from their PCs. So endpoint security became very, very important. Um, you have to allow them to work from those public networks like broadbands and all of that. And then you don't have much control on the physical environment. When people are sitting in an office, you control a lot of that environment, but when they are working from home, you can't. So there is definitely an increase in the cybersecurity budgets. Now, typical ROI discussion is difficult. I would like to focus more of time on that ROI discussion. See, what we do in IT or technology, a good part of it is, towards driving efficiencies, driving, let us say, either the top line or the bottom line or the productivity. These are the three areas, that we contribute in. But there is a lot of stuff that we do, which is to keep things running, which is to make sure that things don't stop, right? and and many times the ROI discussion has to be driven more in the sense that what will you lose if you don't do it, right? So that's like you can call it as a negative ROI if you don't do this. Okay. Now, typically, how you drive these discussions is by creating what I call as a risk register. Okay, so it's a very simple methodology. You can find it. Anyone can tell you that there's an impact of risk and there's a probability of risk that gives you a risk score. And if you put a dollar value on it, okay, so what is the impact of that risk sort of manifesting itself? You get some sort of like a metric or a KPI out there, and then what you can do is you can then start prioritizing your investments based on the risk score. Okay, let's say for example any of these malware attacks, right? They may be rare, they may not happen very frequently, but the impact can be organization wide. Okay, so you really have to assess these risks. You also have to be honest about your own technology landscape. um, so like for example, if you have old equipment, right? If you have, let's say, I know the people around who still are running Windows 95 and all that. So you also have to be honest that, hey, you know what, I'm more at risk because of the specificity of what equipment I have, and therefore my priorities may be different from your priorities. So the risk based investment planning can be a very far reaching. It can help you refresh your equipment, because if you don't refresh your equipment, there can be a massive, let's say, there can be a failure in your infrastructure which can bring the enterprise down. Now, you might not find a ROI in replacing your infrastructure, but I think it makes it very clear that what will happen if I don't do it, if that question is clear. And I have seen that happen in one of my organizations. There was a very very old storage which was running, and IT used to every time used to say that we need to change it, we need to say change it. It cost a lot. It was handling a lot of important data, design data, and finally one day the shit hit the roof, and um, the whole thing came crashing, and it was a crisis. But that was a sort of big ringing bell message to the business that you cannot keep continue postponing IT refreshes just because something is running. If something fails, then and you're not approving that investment, you're not giving the downtime to do the migration and all, you carry the risk. So thankfully, the point was made without anyone in IT losing their job, because it was already out there as a risk which can happen anytime, right? So, Rajesh, I hope that answers your question, which is like, what can go wrong, and have a formal methodology and measurement process and a communication process with your senior people around it. And that generally does the job. Okay. Okay. So let me continue bringing in our audience here. So we have Narottam. Hey, Narottam. Good afternoon. We have Mayank. Hi, Mayank. Good evening. Good to see you here. And maybe ask a question of your own. I'm sure you have many, especially the taboo topics. We have Partha Bhattacharyya here. Hey, Partha. Thanks for joining here. I did see, I think, some question or some comment from you. So maybe, like, if you can post it here, it will be good. We have Manish Anand. Hi, Manish. Good evening. You are a gold mine of questions and discussions. So why not put something that motivates us to get you on the chat? Okay. So we have Dinesh here. So Dinesh, so quick question for Uttarakhand province, India. What are the possibilities for technocrats who are just retiring from their existing industrial career to boost that area economy? Dinesh ji. What are the possibilities of for technocrats who are just retiring from their existing industrial career? Yeah, something that I keep thinking. I probably don't have an answer, a ready-made answer that I can tell you that, hey, you know what, I've thought through it, and this is something I'll be doing. I don't. But I can relate to some of the things that I'm doing as I came out of a full-time corporate career. It is basically to look around. What are the areas around where people require solutions, and where I can be contributing in a useful way. Okay, so and then engage in those areas. Maybe I think with our years of experience and with our gray hair, many times we have you know a way around things, a way to think through things, and think around things that can help, especially thinking through things that can go wrong. And there are many youngsters out there who want to make a difference, but they do not know where the minefields are, where things can go wrong or where they can fall. So one of my favorite activities is to talk to these startup youngsters. um, and anytime somebody reaches out to me, at least give them a few pieces of advice in whatever challenge they are facing. Some sort of thought models or some sort of thought processes, and that generally helps them, and that comes out of the years of experience that we have. Okay, so yeah, I would say engage um, with the local entrepreneurs, and see where you can contribute. What in Uttarakhand that we can do in terms of tourism, promoting the local area tourism. There's a huge flight of people. Yeah. So I have been thinking about, like, homestays is something that can really help from an organized way of thinking. Let's say creating communities of people who can provide a great homestay experience. And I always love my stay in my village or in my in-laws village, and it's a great experience, staying at those heights and in that clean air. And I always keep thinking that how can homestay be a scalable model, which somebody could help out. Okay. The other could be like horticulture is there, and all of that. So where are those areas of impact and areas of opportunities. We just need to find a way to engage there. Yeah. Okay, so let me move on. Dinesh, if there are any follow-up question, any ideas that you have, or anything that you are exploring, do send another comment and we can discuss that. Meanwhile, Rajesh, thanks for playing back your takeaway, like the concept of risk register and the reverse ROI on not doing timely refreshes. Okay, so Manish, I'm still waiting for a question from you. Partha, I mentioned business process automation and reducing attrition. You already addressed the later, citing the example of a great place to work versus lot of money. Okay. So, yeah, I think it was there in my backlog. So let me just go there. Um, was there a question? Was there a question around Partha, around what areas you should be? What are the processes every business must automate? And does business really need digital process automation or RPA to improve ROI? Okay, so let me answer that question on minimal and good to have automations. Okay, so yeah, okay. Would like to hear your views on minimal and good to have automations. Very interesting. I think, we have always heard people complaining about, boring, repetitive jobs, right? Whether it is account reconciliations, or whether it is like, um, just like, having done something out there, coming back and like updating multiple systems, just so that the record keeping gets done. So I think that's where I would say, uh, at least from an, let me take up RPA point of view, because there was another question on RPA from Koundinya Deshik in one of the previous chats, where he asked what are the typical processes every business must automate. Does business really need digital process automation or RPA to improve ROI? Right. So Partha, let me pick up the RPA one. I think RPA, many people think that you can directly jump to RPA, and I think that's a wrong way to think. I think we need to again approach RPA from the first principle. Okay, so what can RPA automate for you? RPA can automate for you things which are absolutely repetitive in nature, where let's say 80% of the transactions look the same. Okay, RPA can, but then those 80% of the transactions being of the same type, or the same way, has another underlying piece of work that needs to be done, which is the process standardization. So let me talk from my experience in building a call center for Tata Motors, and helping build the shared service function. It always starts with consolidating. You would have many versions of the process running around the organization. For example, take an account payable process, right? You will have multiple versions of it. The moment you try to centralize it, there's a certain amount of standardization that comes in. Then you have various scenarios, and in, let's say, accounts payable, material payments, service payments, one of these things, etc., etc., etc. And then you start like creating SOPs around it. So this is how I will handle this. This is how I handle this. This is my turnaround time. This is how I'll manage exceptions. So everything like sort of gets documented and standardized. And I think that's the point. Then an automation comes in. Because now fully clearly that what I have to automate, how many variations, how many scenarios, how to do exception handling and all. So the first step in thinking through an automation is to start asking a question: do I have an SOP around it? Do I have all kinds of exceptions, to be managed around it? And if you don't, then I think that's the place to start. I always believe that the starting point in any kind of automation or technology intervention is the process. The technology always comes later. If you haven't thought around the process, if you haven't standardized your process, I don't think any technology can help you. So, coming to your question, Partha, would it on minimal and good to have automations? Um, yeah, I think in different scenarios, I think the thought model here should be that where is that, there's this Japanese way of thinking about Kaizen and 5S, which is you look at, Muda, right? Muda is the wastage. Okay, so the wastage can be in terms of human effort, the wastage could be in terms of material, the wastage could be in terms of, um, you know, uh, in terms of movement. So when you look around, when you go around, in any operational area, so typically automation will always help you where there is a multitude of transactions. Okay, so like for example, your areas of operation, whether it's your manufacturing plant or whether it's your warehouses or whether it's your, let's say, your dealer sales, outlets or service outlets. So look for any opportunities for automation. Look for an area where there are, hundreds and thousands of transactions happening on a daily basis. Okay, the worst place to look for automation is headquarters. No work happens in hot headquarters. Okay, nothing worth automation happens in headquarters. It's all like brain work. So as a CIO or as a IT person, go and just be an observer for what's happening in your operational areas. Where is repetitive work happening? Where is the, where are the, what do you call, chances of error happening? And then you will start thinking that, okay, how can we standardize it? How can we then automate it and stuff like that, right? Okay, so we have, okay, so this guy, this is the danger in asking Manish to ask questions, that he'll ask questions that will be like, the Patience in Bedi spinners. Okay. So have CISO and CDO and CTO made CIO role more confusing? That's a bouncer of a question, Manish, I should say, because there are no right answers. Okay. Well, if you want to, answer that question, I think you have a point of view. If you want to answer that question, I'm just asking my team to send you the studio link. Hey Vinay, can you send Manish the studio link and join us in the studio, Manish? We can have a discussion on that. Okay. Okay. And so let me wait for you to join. Otherwise, I'll ask that question if you don't want to join. Okay. But let me move on to the next question. So Vijay. So Vijay is asking, I'm in IT services, sales and delivery in a small SI in the Gulf. Our core business is hardware and networking. Software services is a smaller part of the business and had been growing from 2012 to 2020. And he says, second part of the question, however, over the last couple of years, business has been very tough with minimal new sales. I have this feeling that I'm losing my relevance as my efforts don't seem to result in conversions. Okay, and can you suggest how do I stay relevant? Okay. Yeah, our core business is in hardware and networking. Software services is a small part of the business and had been growing. Last couple of years, business has been very tough with minimal new sales. So, Vijay, again, let's start thinking from the first principle. So, where are the root causes here? Is it that there are people who are able to underbid you? That means you are getting opportunities, but you are losing them. Or is it that you see that the opportunities are not there? Because one thing that has definitely happened in hardware and networking is that um, you know um, a lot of this stuff is like like for example, a lot of your server stuff and all of that is moving towards cloud. Okay, so people are preferring that. Now I don't know what's the scene in the Gulf and how much is cloud relevant or prevalent there. Okay. So that part we do see some disruption, with this, with cloud and various other stuff coming there. Now, software services, what I see around is that it is something which is not stopping anytime. In fact, there's this whole war for talent out there, which is a lot in software services. So that is where I think then you need to look at what are the areas that you are playing in, and are these the right areas? Okay. So there are no, I would say, uh, straight answers to that question. But I think the entry point in terms of a solution to you will be where you are able to ask questions, within the business and to yourself, and come to some honest answers around what are the root causes of uh, why it is happening, right? Um, and if you have a conversion issue, and you also have to break down your entire sales cycle into different stages and see that which stages are really tough to move on. So maybe I don't know whether you use a CRM, because sometimes CRMs give you that kind of insight. And I'm helping one of the entrepreneurs, and we actually built out almost like a 20 more than 20 actually, about a 35, 40 column Excel, mapping out every single thing that happens in the pipeline, moving from one stage to another stage, and then, bringing some KPIs there, like, for example, how long is your sales cycle? And then, started mapping, like, okay, so generally the business closes in so many days, right? And if something is going beyond that, more likely or not, we are going to lose it, right? So the other question to ask yourself is that, uh, what is the data that I am working with? Okay, so sometimes this ambiguous feeling that you have, that I'm losing my relevance, more efforts does not seem to result in conversions. They typically indicate to me that you don't have sufficient data, and therefore, like, you have this ambiguity. Otherwise, you can be very clear that, not enough leads, or conversions not happening at the last stage, or or what it is, or, like, even, let's say, for example, a lost opportunity analysis can tell you whether you lost it due to price, or whether you lost it due to bigger vendors being out there, or whether you lost it due to, let's say, the customer not getting a good word about you from your previous customers. And I think somewhere it is also important to see, in today's world, advocacy plays a big role. Okay. So if you are going after new customers, they will typically ask you, where else have you worked? Okay. And they're going to check with these people as to, like, hey, are you happy with Vijay? Okay. And if they don't get a that raving fan type of answer, that, hey, I'm very happy with Vijay, they are more likely or not going to go with somebody else. So one of the areas of inquiry that you can really look at is to see whether your existing customers are happy with you or not, because it's a very transparent world, networked world, and it's very easy for people to figure out whether your customers are happy with you or not, and then why should I be your next guinea pig, right? Okay, so yeah, thanks, Partha, uh, for that validation that, yes, RPA to improve ROI can be an example. Um, okay, so Partha, your next question, I think around that is, would you recommend branded RPAs like Automation Anywhere UiPath or open source? Do we need to pay license fees to prevent security lapses? Partha, I think it depends on, like, how critical is your business process. If I have, let us say, a financial process being automated, and I wouldn't really want to risk it on an open source. But if you have, let's say, a simple thing, like, for example, if you want to automate a process of uh, you know um, let's say, stuff coming on your website, and then you want to put them into your CRM using a RPA type of automation as a service request, and then generating some mails, etc. That's something that I don't see a big risk or impact of using something open source there. It will be always contextual. It will be depending on your business criticality, and I think, I mean, again, um, the costs involved. Like, for example, if you're automating your financial processes with RPA, there's a certain type of resource that you're saving on, right? So the savings can be larger in that case. Whereas, like, if you're just some basic non-financial clerical work you are avoiding with RPA, the cost savings are lower. So you can actually think of open source. But typically, it is always good to reduce complexity. From an architecture cleanliness point of view, it's better to reduce complexity and sweat out these resources. Like, for example, a software bot can work 24 by 7 for you, right? So, a person will work for 8 hours for you. So it can work 24 by 7 for you. Number one, it can multitask. That means you can write multiple automations. You can, let's say, run an automation for an hour. The same bot can run one automation, and then it can run another one. So you can sweat it out. Even though it may be costly, but if you really sweat it out. You may not want too much of that, right? But if you're a large organization, you definitely would need more, but then you will also have a bigger impact, right? Okay, so we have our uh, audience guest here. Hi, Manish. Good to see you.
Hi Jagdish, good to see you too. You know,
Yeah.
I wasn't kind of prepared that you will ask me to answer my own question. So I would have been probably more happy contributing to your answer to Partha's question, but you just ended up asking me my own pain point.
Manish, see, you are a known devil, right? So, by the way, for all the audience out there, Manish and I worked for a brief period for about, I think, a year or so,
A year and a half
and
approximately.
a year and a half when he was handling an entire plant of Pantnagar, the IT there, and
Correct.
we very quickly realized together that he's made for bigger things, and I was happy to let him go and do bigger things.
You taught me and made me smarter, if I may admit that. Had you kept me dumb, I would have stayed. But you put me into so many good things, and I learned so much that probably I had to you know, walk into something bigger. So thanks a lot for that.
Oh, no, no, no. I think the best thing you had, Manish, was the initiative, and like not taking no for an answer when it comes to solving a business problem. And I think so. It was all your initiative. All I had to do was not to say no to you.
Thanks, Jagdish. Just for our audience to give them a smile. I never used to say no because I was balancing my married life into my professional life.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah. So, Manish, one thing that I learned that works with you is that you are always prepared. You are always always ask a question to get an answer which you already have in your mind. Okay. So my approach with you and with people like you is that when you ask a question, I ask, okay, what's your opinion? Okay. So so when you ask that question, I'm sure you have an opinion
See,
on the
I'll,
CIO
I'll
versus
put it
CTO
this
versus
way.
CTO.
I No, you are
Okay.
absolutely right, Jagdish. But I see where I have a confusion is, and to be very frank, I'm back into a CIO role now. And what I have seen is, I understand that at some point of time we had segregation of duties. So if I remember my stint with you, uh, correct me if I'm wrong, but I never heard of a CISO or a CDO, and we drove projects across, supplier relationship. We transformed the plant operations. We talked about supply chain management and managing those 1,000 vehicles coming out of Pantnagar plant every day. None of these things had any imprint of talking to a CTO or a CDO, but we did it. Now that was 2012. Since then, we have CISOs coming in, and with no offense against any position, I see it as a segregation of duty. But what I also see is that everything comes and rests back on CIO shoulders, because ultimately the core is technology, and technology is managed by a CIO. So I don't know why this shift happened. Was it only purely because of segregation of duties, or it was because the transformation and the security took a new and a very important landscape? But where I finally got confused was that now in today's world, and I don't know how many people would agree to me, including yourself, are we just looking at assigning responsibilities for driving transformation, or we are just fighting a war amongst ourselves, that who does and where is the strategy and who handles the technology and who manages the stakeholders and all these things? So that's why I asked this question, that in your view, are we entering into a wrong design in the name of segregation of duties or whatever? So that's why I asked this question.
Okay. Okay. No, no, no. That's a great question. In fact, Manish, whenever we come across these questions, I would like to like take an outside in view of it. So what happens is that as much as an area starts getting more and more complex, you see these. more and more roles which will start to come in, right? I mean, I'll take an example of HR, right? Something that has become more and more complex over last few decades, right? So, for example, today in HR you will find a HR business partnership role becoming more and more important. You will see that organizations nowadays have a chief learning officer, right? um, Organizations have something, a role which is, let's say, a head of compensation, right? A compensation design. So it's just a function of complexity that, as complexity increases in something, the specialization also needs to be brought in to handle that level of complexity. So I think CISO role is a logical one. In fact, I think this is also something which is as per the IT Act that you're supposed to have a CISO. Okay. But that role, you are right. That role used to be a little bit more like working very closely with the CIO, and then um, and then sometimes being a stamp, but no longer, right? I mean, as cyber threats are increasing, as the world is becoming more and more networked, and everything that you work on has an IP and can be accessed from anywhere, I think you have that level of sophistication and that level of complexity for a CISO to be to come in. I also see the same conundrum in case of, let's say, chief digital officer, right? So I was, I mean, uh, as let's say these as IT or I mean, I would differentiate between IT and technology, as IT is something which generates data which can be used for enterprise, right? So as IT or the data generation goes more into your products, right, and more into your, the endpoints of the organization. Earlier they were not there on the endpoint. They were not there in the last mile. They were not there with their sales people, service people, the mechanics. In your products, they were not there. Now, as they are getting there, there's a different level of data generation that is likely to happen, right? And there is a very different way to look at how should we generate data there, how should we motivate people to use it and all, and therefore you know many times to handle that customer and product part of IT, you have a CDO. So I was talking to one of the Austrian CIOs on ClariTea chat, and he did not see a conflict between CIO and CDO, and they had very, very clear cut responsibilities that anything which is customer facing and product facing will be part of the CDO organization. Anything that is within the data fabric of the company, okay, that means your processes, your employee experience, your what do you call computing infrastructure, architecture, etc., that will all fall under IT. So I think these things are the roles are becoming divided primarily because of the increasing complexity in those roles. That's my take on it. I don't really see anything wrong in that. Many a times, I think the wrong is when it comes as a you know as a diabolical approach. What many times you are saying that, oh, yeah, this guy cannot do this. Okay, now I need to bring in somebody else, and then you create a parallel power center out there, and you don't really clarify the roles and responsibilities. You don't establish a governance between the two, and then then they start working at cross purposes, right? Then the CIO says that, okay, CDO आ गया, तो let me see वो सर्वर कैसे लेता है, let me see वो नेटवर्क का फायरवॉल में कैसे कुछ ओपन कराता है. We don't have, I mean, if you are not designing it properly, if you are having any negative attitudes around defining these roles, then you are in for trouble, right?
Got it, Dinesh. So, just one add-on question to it. In your view, from your experience, what could be the best framework that could, define a very collaborative way of having all these roles coexist in an organization?
Yeah. So Manish, very, very important question. And in fact, if you work in IT and if you want to really succeed in IT, the answer to that question comes in the form of governance, right?
Okay.
So I mean, even when you were there, you would have seen, like, we wanted to create those discussion forums, right? So, like, for example, you making a you being part of the plant heads A team, you making a presentation to them once in a while, I coming in at say once or twice every year, and and having a discussion with the people. So it's like hearing each other, looking at each other's concerns, pressure points, where you can help me, where I can help you, because see, humankind is what it is today because of collaboration, because how we help each other, right? So so these roles, I think each one has something to contribute to each other. So number one, right, there is a need for those roles. That is what we need to understand. The second thing is that there will always be those those friction points between two functions, whatever be the function. As a CIO, I have seen that IT function had some or the other friction point with each of the other function, and most of the times the answer is in just sitting across the table, having an honest conversation around, like, what I what is it that you're doing that hurts me, and then something coming from the other side, and then you finding out via media, right? The same thing here. I mean, no, in information security, you're dealing with 20 different departments with different views. Very very liberal coming from sales and marketing to very very tough coming from engineering, design, and manufacturing. How will you resolve it unless you set up the governance mechanisms, right? So similarly, like like for example, this guy, what he told was, his name was Dr. Boris Pivinkar, that the CIO will look after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. The CDO will look after these things. These are the areas that CIO will support the CDO. These are the areas that CDO will take CIO into confidence, right? So the answers are in setting up, governance, sort of democratic mechanism of having an exchange of ideas on a regular basis, so that there is no bad blood, and there are no, I would say, there's no second-hand information about each other. That's how I would look at it.
Could I just request you, Jagdish, if you could share these thoughts in one of your articles on LinkedIn?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you, Jagdish. Thanks a lot.
I'll do that. I'll do that. Yeah. In fact, when we bring out the newsletter for this one, for this episode, this part will come. Of course, that is quite a few weeks away, but I'll definitely write an article about it. Hey, thanks for joining me, Manish. Good to see you after a long time. We have talked, but we haven't really met face to face on video like this. It's good that we could meet you because of Clarity Chat.
Thanks for having me here, Jagdish. Take
Right.
care.
Thanks, Manish. Bye bye. Have a good evening. Bye
Bye.
bye. Okay, so guys, we are. Oh, how time flies! It's just like discussing with each other, and we are past the hour. We are at 6:04. So let me see if there's something else here, or if there are any new audience who I want to say thanks to. Yes, I can see Umesh here. Umesh Vijay Varghya. Hi Vijay, good to see you here. Thank you for joining. And okay, so with Manish, the discussion that we were having, Partha has a point of view. He says it's just like the segregation of infra and apps in the last 10 years, of application development, support, and data management the last 5 years, that you have the segregation now among CDO, CISO, and CIO. Absolutely, Partha. I think that's a good reflection, and I think that kind of aligns with what I mentioned about the increasing complexity driving the segregation of roles in a more clearer way. Bringing more and more strategic focus in each of these areas, and therefore the segregation of those roles. Yeah. Yeah, from a vendor point of view, we need to talk to multiple stakeholders and balance their expectations. Absolutely. I think it doesn't get any easier, from a partner point of view. I think the areas that you need to engage, the points of engagement become multiple. But I think, Partha, one thing you will realize that, in terms of having successful conversations with different people, some of them who may not know technology as much, is, to get a sharper focus on the value part of it, right? So, if you have a pitch which says that, hey, this is what I do for you, as you go and meet a new stakeholder, this is what I do for you, and this is what we've done. If you're talking in the project language, we completed this project, we completed this project, we completed this project, people will switch off. But if you are connected to the outcomes of that project and you say that, hey, we helped you raise your KPI from this to this, we helped you save so many $1 million, we helped you, increase your pipeline conversions by this implementation, those things connect much better. So have a value focused conversation to connect with as many stakeholders as appear out there. Okay, so we have run out of questions. We do have some backlog of questions, but I wanted to finish on time today. I've not succeeded so far, but it was good to have a conversation with Manish. So so thank you, everyone. Again, I think a good interactive session. We could cover actually more questions today, and thanks Manish for coming online with us and driving a very important discussion on how much should we get confused about the different roles. Okay, so thank you everyone for attending and engaging, and thank you everyone who's watching the recording of this session. Please enjoy your family time. Please enjoy your weekend, and we will be back on next Saturday, yes, 18th of June. Till then, bye bye, and enjoy your weekend.